The chandeliers of Ashbourne Hall blazed like a constellation caught in glass, their prisms scattering light upon silks, jewels, and powdered shoulders. The year was 1842, and the London season had reached its fevered height. Beneath the vault of painted cherubs and gilt cornices, laughter rippled like champagne. The music of a waltz drifted through the air, sweet, languid, and treacherous. For Clara Whitmore, standing at the edge of the ballroom, it was both enchantment and torment. Her gown was pale lavender, chosen by her mother for modest charm rather than splendor. It was not new, merely altered. The lace at her sleeves trembled when she moved, revealing hands unaccustomed to jewels. Around her, the women gleamed like porcelain, faces powdered to perfection, eyes trained in the art of indifference. She had rehearsed her smiles before a cracked mirror in the days leading to this night, but already she felt them falter. "Don't linger near the curtains, my dear," whispered her mother, Lady Whitmore, her voice soft but urgent. Gentlemen noticed confidence, not hesitation. "Yes, Mamma," Clara murmured, yet her gaze drifted inevitably toward the crowd, where he stood, the man whose mere presence seemed to shift the air itself. Lord Nathaniel Harrow, second son to the Duke of Ashbourne. He was dressed in black, the severity of his attire softened by the faint gleam of a silver watch chain. His expression, as ever, carried a quiet detachment, as though he moved through the world observing rather than belonging. Once, years ago, Clara had spoken to him at a garden fete. A brief exchange about poetry and weather. Nothing remarkable, and yet it had settled in her memory like a pressed flower. Since then, her admiration had grown in silence, fed by the rare glimpses of him in newspapers or passing carriages. Tonight, she had promised herself that she would not look at him again, and yet she did every few minutes, unconsciously, helplessly. From the corner of her eye, she caught the sharp tilt of another woman's fan. Lady Eloise Fairley, her cousin. Dazzling in crimson silk, Eloise was the evening's unchallenged star. Her laughter carried through the ballroom like a bell, drawing men as effortlessly as a flame draws moths. When her gaze found Clara's, it was accompanied by a slow, deliberate smile that never reached her eyes. "How quaint you look tonight, Clara," Eloise murmured when their paths crossed near the refreshment table. "The simplicity becomes you, truly. So few women can make plainness seem so earnest." Clara's throat tightened. "I did not come to be admired, Eloise." "No? Then for what purpose?" Eloise's fan flicked open, painted peacocks glimmering in miniature. "Perhaps to be pitted? Or, no, perhaps for Lord Nathaniel's notice. How charming." Clara froze. "I do not seek." But Eloise had already turned to a cluster of friends, lowering her voice just enough to make it rise again in curiosity among them. Laughter followed, discreet but unmistakable. Across the room, Nathaniel was speaking with his elder brother, the Duke's heir, a man whose smile held the ease of one accustomed to applause. Their eyes for an instant met. Something unreadable flickered in Nathaniel's expression, then was gone. A waltz began. Couples gathered beneath the chandeliers, the violins swelling with invitation. Clara's breath caught when she heard a murmur at her side. "He asked after you," whispered a young lady named Marianne, one of the few kind souls in her circle. "Lord Nathaniel, I mean. He said he hoped to claim the next dance." Clara felt her pulse rise sharply. He did." Marianne nodded, eyes bright. "Yes, indeed. You must be ready." The moment felt impossible luminous. Perhaps Eloise's cruelty would fade. Perhaps her mother's faith was not in vain. She smoothed her gown, lifted her chin, and stepped toward the center of the room, where pairs were forming. The music swelled again. Violins glistened with feeling. She waited. The first dance ended. Another began. Her hands grew cold. Marianne, uncertain, whispered apologies and slipped away. The murmurs around her began to change timbre from curiosity to amusement. At the edge of the crowd, Eloise laughed, lightly but with purpose. Nathaniel remained where he was in conversation with others, his gaze occasionally flicking toward Clara, but never approaching. The truth began to dawn, slow and excruciating. Someone had lied. The laughter spread, softly at first, then with the contagion of cruelty. Did she think he would dance with her? Oh, the poor dear. So very misplaced. Clara's cheeks burned as though struck. She turned slightly, pretending to adjust her glove, but the movement only revealed her trembling. The chandeliers above blurred through unshed tears. She wanted to flee, but her mother was across the room, deep in conversation with a matron of standing. Pride, fragile but fierce, rooted her to the floor. If she fled now, she would give them their triumph. So she stood still, every heartbeat a drumbeat of humiliation. Then, through the shimmer of candlelight, she saw Nathaniel look toward her once more. His expression had changed. There was something in it, conflict, perhaps, or regret. His lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but he did not move. A man approached instead, older, with a polished smile and too much perfume. Sir Alaric Dunn. My dear Miss Whitmore, he drawled, bowing low. It seems Lord Nathaniel has misplaced his chivalry. Allow me to offer mine in its stead. The laughter that followed was genteel, yet vicious. Clara curtsied mechanically. You are most kind, Sir Alaric, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. But she declined the dance. Too proud to accept, he murmured, his smile thinning. Too weary, she replied, and turned away before the sting of his retort could reach her. By the time she reached the terrace doors, the music behind her had become a mockery, a glittering echo of the night's cruelty. The cold air struck her face like absolution. She stepped outside. The garden stretched in darkness, the moon trapped in the lake's reflection. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe. From the ballroom, distant laughter spilled into night. She heard Eloise's voice among them, bright and merciless. Her mother found her there minutes later. Clara, she said softly, drawing her shawl tighter around her shoulders, it is time we left. The carriage is waiting. Clara nodded. Words had deserted her. As they crossed the marble steps, she glanced back once through the open doors. Nathaniel stood near the threshold, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed upon her. A single step forward, and then none. The ride home was silent save for the rhythmic clatter of wheels against cobblestone. Her mother's gloved hand rested atop hers, trembling. People are cruel, my dear, she whispered finally. They laugh because it spares them from their own reflection. Promise me you will not let them define you. Clara looked out into the night. The lamps of London blurred past like ghosts. I promise, she said, though the words felt fragile, as if spoken from a wound still open. When they reached their modest townhouse, her mother coughed, an echo of frailty that deepened Clara's silence. The doctor would later call it a nervous condition, though the truth was simpler. Humiliation corrodes more than pride. Within days, the Whitmores withdrew from society. Invitations ceased. The world moved on. In drawing rooms and supper parties, her name became shorthand for naivete. The girl who waited for a dance that never came. The plain cousin who mistook politeness for interest. Months later, as they prepared to leave London altogether, Clara found among her discarded things a small lavender ribbon that had once adorned her gown. She held it in her hands for a long time before folding it into a book of sonnets, her quiet burial of the season that had broken her. On their final night in the city, a carriage passed beneath her window. Through the lace curtains, she glimpsed a figure within, a man in black, face half lit by lamplight. He looked up once, as though drawn by a force neither could name. Their eyes met for the span of a heartbeat. Then the carriage rolled on, vanishing into the fog. Clara closed the window, though not before a chill swept through the room, carrying the faintest trace of violets from the gardens of Ashbourne. She pressed her hand against the glass, her reflection pale and solemn against the night. Somewhere beyond the city's glittering haze, laughter still echoed in memory. But beneath it, a quieter sound began to stir, the first heartbeat of resolve. And though she could not yet know it, the man who had not spoken that night would one day cross oceans of propriety and shame to utter the words he had swallowed. For now, he remained only a shadow in her past, watching, silent, as the carriage that bore her away disappeared into dawn. 5 years had passed since the night the chandeliers of Ashbourne burned her memory into humiliation. Time, that most deceptive physician, had dulled the sting, but never cured it. Clara Whitmore now lived in the quiet hills of Somerset, in the modest but sunlit house of the Talbots, an old family friend who had engaged her as governess to their 2 children. Her days moved gently, marked by lessons, letters, and the sigh of wind through orchard trees. She had learned, in those years, that dignity could grow even in exile. Yet there were moments, on still mornings when dew clung to the grass, that the past would flicker unbidden. A ballroom, a waltz unclaimed, and a man who had watched but never spoken. On an April afternoon, a knock came upon the schoolroom door. A servant entered hesitant. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "a rider has come from London with a letter bearing the seal of Ashbourne." The name struck her like a forgotten chord. "Ashbourne," she repeated softly. "Are you certain?" "Yes, miss. The Duke's own crest." Her hand trembled as she took the envelope. The wax was deep green, the crest pressed sharply, unchanged from the nights she had seen it glittering on carriages before the great hall. For a moment she simply stared, uncertain whether to open it. Curiosity warred with dread. Finally, she broke the seal. The letter was brief, written in a firm, precise hand not known to her. "Miss Whitmore, it has come to the attention of His Grace, the Duke of Ashbourne, that the late Sir Reginald Whitmore's estate includes holdings still entangled with the northern Ashbourne lands. His Grace requests your presence at Ashbourne Hall for clarification and settlement of these matters. You will, of course, be received with courtesy, respectfully, James Harrow, on behalf of the Duke of Ashbourne." Clara read it twice, as if a hidden meaning might reveal itself between the lines. Her father's affairs had long been settled, or so she believed, yet here in ink and wax was the summons that would draw her back to the scene of her ruin. That night, she wrote a polite acceptance. The handwriting on her reply was steady, though her heart was not. When the carriage came for her a week later, she wore a gown of dove-gray wool, practical and unadorned. The journey north unfolded through soft hills and mists, each mile peeling away the years she had tried to bury. As Ashbourne's towers emerged against the horizon, her chest tightened. The estate was as magnificent as she remembered. Ancient oaks, sprawling lawns, a facade of pale stone that caught the fading light like a memory refusing to dim. She was received not by the Duke himself, but by his steward. "His Grace is unwell," the man explained, "but Lord Nathaniel acts in his stead." The name, spoken aloud, seemed to echo through her. "Lord Nathaniel," she repeated. "Yes, miss. He will attend to you in the drawing-room." The drawing-room's doors opened to the familiar scent of roses and oak polish. Nathaniel stood by the window, his figure outlined by sunlight. He had changed, not dramatically but undeniably. The boyish refinement had hardened into gravity. The eyes, still gray, carried something quieter, heavier. When he turned, his expression betrayed a flicker of disbelief, as though the years had not prepared him for her presence. "Miss Whitmore," he said, bowing, "you are kind to come." "I was requested," she replied gently. "I would not wish to inconvenience His Grace." His lips curved faintly, though his voice remained measured. "You never could." A pause stretched between them, filled by the ticking of a clock and the distant call of crows. Clara glanced around. The same portraits, the same crimson drapes. The room had preserved her humiliation like a shrine. Nathaniel gestured toward a small table where documents lay neatly arranged. "There are matters concerning your father's holdings. A misunderstanding, it seems, of old boundaries. I wish to ensure your comfort in resolving it." She stepped closer, her composure precise. "You might have written, my lord. I did not expect. To see me?" His tone was gentle, though something raw glimmered beneath. "Nor I you. Yet here we are, bound again by Ashbourne's walls." She said nothing. After a moment he reached into his coat and withdrew a small object wrapped in linen. "Before we begin, there is something else, something that belongs to you." He placed it upon the table. Clara unwrapped it slowly, revealing a delicate silver locket, tarnished with age but unmistakable. Her initials C.W. were engraved upon the back. Her breath caught. "This was lost," she murmured, "at the ball years ago." He nodded. "It was found near the terrace the next morning. I kept it, though I had no right to." The words, quiet as they were, fell between them like confession. She traced the locket's edge with her thumb, memories flashing, laughter, music, the sting of betrayal. "Why keep it, my lord?" His gaze met hers, unwavering. "Because I lacked the courage to return it then, because I feared what it might mean if I did." Her composure faltered. "And what does it mean now?" "That I am done fearing what is true." The silence that followed was alive, as though the air itself held its breath. Clara felt a strange ache, half sorrow, half recognition. The man before her was no longer the uncertain observer of that night. There was a weariness about him, but also something resolute. "I should thank you," she said at last. "It is only an object, but—" "No," he interrupted softly. "Not only. Some things we keep because they remind us of who we failed to be." Their eyes met. The clock ticked on. At last he turned back to the window, his voice quieter. "Society was cruel to you. To my shame, I was silent when I should have spoken. You have every reason to despise me." "I do not despise you," she said. "I have long ceased to think of you at all." The lie rang clear to both of them. He smiled faintly, acknowledging it without reproach. "Then I am fortunate that memory is kinder to me than to you." When the steward entered again, announcing that dinner would be served, Clara seized the interruption with relief. Yet through the meal, formal, polite, suffocating, her mind circled the same thought. Why summon her for a matter so trivial? Why now, after 5 silent years? Later, as twilight deepened, she stood in the corridor awaiting her carriage to the inn. Nathaniel appeared once more, his expression unreadable. "I hope you found everything in order," he said. "Yes," she replied. "The matter seems resolved." "Then perhaps it was worth your journey." She inclined her head, meaning to take her leave, but he hesitated. "Miss Whitmore," he said, and his voice lowered, "before you go, open the locket." Her fingers tightened around it. "Why?" "Because it holds what I could not say." Uncertain, she unlatched the clasp. Inside, instead of a miniature or curl of hair, she found a small slip of paper folded with care. On it, written in an elegant but hesitant hand, were 5 words. "Forgive me, CWN.H." The handwriting was years old, the ink had faded. It had been written not recently, but long ago, perhaps even that same night. She lifted her gaze. "You wrote this when?" When silence became cowardice, he answered. "But by then you had gone." Emotion caught in her throat, uninvited. "Why show me now?" "Because I have lived with that silence longer than I deserve. And because," he stopped as if the rest were perilous, "because perhaps you should know that you were not forgotten." She could find no reply. Words felt too frail to contain the enormity of what she felt. Anger, sorrow, something like hope's shadow. The steward appeared again to announce that the carriage was ready. Nathaniel inclined his head, retreating into formality once more. "I wish you a safe journey, Miss Whitmore." "Good evening, my lord," she managed, the locket cold against her palm. Outside, the air was thick with mist. As the carriage wheels began to turn, she glanced back at the great house. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, his figure dark against the lighted hall. He did not move, only watched as she vanished down the drive. When at last she looked down, the locket lay open upon her lap, the faded note trembling with the rhythm of the road. She closed it gently, but the words, those 5 impossible words, seemed to pulse against her palm, alive again after all these years. "Forgive me, CWNH." The wind through the open window lifted a strand of her hair, whispering like a voice she had tried to forget. And though she pressed her eyes shut, she could still see him, standing in the rain-streaked light of Ashbourne Hall, as though time itself had been waiting for her return. The storm had begun without warning. By dusk, rain fell in silver veils against the glass walls of the Ashbourne Orangery, where the scent of citrus and damp earth mingled with the hum of thunder. Clara stood among the orange trees, her shawl drawn close, listening to the storm as though it might drown out the turmoil within her. She had intended to leave the next morning, to return to her quiet post in Somerset and bury the locket's message among other unhealed memories. Yet something restless kept her awake, an unease born not of pain, but of unfinished truth. When the door opened behind her, she knew without turning who it was. Nathaniel's voice broke through the rhythm of rain. "You mean to depart before dawn?" She turned slowly. He looked pale in the lamplight, his coat darkened by the storm. "Yes," she said, "my purpose here is concluded." "Concluded?" he repeated softly, stepping nearer. "Then I have failed to speak in time." The words unsettled her. "If this is about the letter," she said carefully, "you have said all that could be said." "Not all," he replied. "There is more, what I should have spoken that night and every day since." Clara looked away, her hands twisting the edge of her shawl. "You owe me nothing now, my lord." "I owe you truth," he said, "and perhaps, if you can bear it, forgiveness." Lightning illuminated the glass panes, throwing their reflections into motion. He moved closer until she could see the faint tremor in his jaw, the exhaustion that clung to him. "The night of the ball," he began, "I meant to ask you to dance. I swear it upon my name. I had watched you for months, your quiet composure, your refusal to wound even when mocked. You were," he faltered, voice unsteady, "different from every other woman in that gilded room." Her breath caught, but she said nothing. "Yet before I reached you," he continued, "my brother found me. He was already promised to Eloise, though society had not yet been told. He laughed when he saw where I was going, said I would disgrace the family for the sake of a governess's daughter. He and Eloise made it a jest, a cruel game, one I was too weak to stop. When I saw them whispering, I understood their intent, but I did nothing. I let you stand there alone." The confession fell between them like thunder. Clara closed her eyes, the old humiliation blooming again. "So it was a jest," she whispered, "a punishment for daring to be seen." "No," he said quickly, "a punishment for me for cowardice. I told myself I was sparing you greater cruelty, that to intervene would only deepen the scandal. But the truth is simpler, I was afraid. Afraid of ridicule, of my family's scorn, of what it would mean to choose you openly." "And afterward?" she asked, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "You let me become a story for their amusement. I searched for you," he said, desperation cutting through restraint. "But your family vanished from London. I wrote twice, thrice, and burned each letter before sending it. Then your mother's death reached me, and I thought any intrusion would wound you further." Clara turned from him, her eyes fixed on the rain streaming down the glass. "You watched my life from afar, then, as one observes a tragedy they helped author." He bowed his head. "Yes." The word carried the weight of years. She drew a long breath. "And now, after all this time, you expect me to grant absolution with a single conversation?" "No," he said quietly. "I expect nothing. I only hoped you might see the man I became, not to erase the boy I was, but to answer him." For a long moment, the storm spoke for them both. The lamplight flickered, haloing the air with warmth. "You think time redeems you," she said at last. "But some wounds do not fade, they adapt. They become part of one's composure." "I do not seek redemption," he murmured, "only understanding." "Then understand this," she said, turning to face him. "It was not your silence that ruined me, it was what it revealed. That kindness in your world was weakness, that sincerity invited mockery. You taught me to hide what was real." Her words struck him like a physical blow. He stepped closer until only the faintest distance remained between them. "And what is real now, Clara?" he asked softly. Her name in his voice undid something long kept sealed. She looked up, meeting his gaze. The years between them dissolved in the charged silence. "What is real," she said, "is that I survived you." The simplicity of it disarmed him. He reached for her hand, hesitated, then let his own fall back to his side. "You did," he said, "and that is why I admire you still. Admire, she echoed bitterly. How easily men choose that word when love would cost too much. He flinched. Do you truly believe I never loved you? Love, she repeated, her voice low. A man who loved me would have crossed that ballroom floor. He moved then, one step closer, as though drawn by something inevitable. Then, let me cross it now. The gesture was small but tremored with meaning. He took her hand, cold, resistant, and pressed it against his heart. The rhythm beneath was unsteady. If this is too late, he said, say so, and I will not speak again. But know that every silence since that night has been filled with your absence. Tears welled unbidden, but Clara did not look away. For the first time, she saw him not as the figure who had humiliated her, but as a man haunted by his own cowardice. And though pity flickered, it did not soften her resolve. I cannot forgive you tonight, she said, not because I hate you, but because forgiveness offered too quickly would dishonor what I endured. He nodded, his voice rough. Then I will wait, as long as waiting takes. The words, simple and sincere, pierced her defenses more sharply than any apology. She withdrew her hand, trembling. You should not. I cannot help it, he said. I waited once in silence. I will not make that error twice. Lightning flashed again, illuminating their faces, his pale with hope, hers shadowed by conflict. The rain softened to a steady whisper. For a moment, neither spoke. When she finally stepped back, her shawl brushed against his sleeve, leaving a trace of warmth. Good night, my lord, she said. He bowed slightly, though his gaze clung to hers. Good night, Miss Whitmore. She turned toward the door, each step deliberate, composed. Yet, at the threshold, something, instinct, perhaps, made her glance back. He stood motionless beneath the orange trees, his face lifted toward the rain-washed glass, as if seeking absolution from the storm itself. Then a sound cut through the hush, the sharp click of a door opening at the far end of the corridor. A voice, cool and unmistakable, carried across the marble floor. Forgive me, said Lady Eloise, her tones sweet with poison. Have I interrupted? Clara froze. Nathaniel's head turned sharply toward the doorway, the color draining from his face. Outside, thunder rolled once more, distant but gathering, and in that instant, Clara knew the scandal that had once destroyed her was about to be born again. The door's echo lingered like a struck bell. Clara's pulse beat hard in her throat as Lady Eloise stepped forward, her gown whispering over the marble. The scent of rain and orange blossoms turned sharp, almost metallic. Nathaniel stood between them, his expression taut, his voice struggling for calm. Eloise, he said, this is neither the time nor the place. Oh, but it is precisely both, she replied, her smile brittle as glass. One seldom finds such a charming tableau. A gentleman alone with his former governess's daughter after midnight in the Duke's private orangery. How dreadfully poetic. Clara's hand tightened at her side. She would have left, but instinct warned her that retreat would only feed the rumor Eloise had come to sow. You misunderstand, Lady Eloise, she said evenly. We were speaking only of matters long past. Eloise's eyes glittered. Indeed? And yet your tone carries such intimacy, Miss Whitmore. I dare say the servants would think otherwise. She turned her gaze toward Nathaniel, the faintest arch to her brow. Surely you wouldn't wish your household to think ill of your guest? Nathaniel's restraint faltered. Enough, he said, the single word weighted with command. If you have business with me, speak it plainly. My business. Eloise's laughter was low, cruel. My dear Nathaniel, you've always mistaken cowardice for courtesy. I warned you once that sentiment would ruin you. I see now it has. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, throwing her face into stark relief, beauty edged with malice. Clara felt the air tighten, every beat of the rain marking time toward disaster. I will not stand here to be insulted, Clara said, her composure fragile, but unbroken. Eloise's lips curved. Then perhaps you should kneel instead, as before. The word struck like a slap. Nathaniel took a step forward, fury igniting behind his eyes. You will apologize for speaking the truth? Eloise laughed again, her voice echoing through the glass chamber. How quaint. You forget, my lord, I was promised to you before your sudden affection for fallen women took root. Clara's breath caught. Promised, she repeated, though she already knew. The locket's emblem, the crest that had haunted her, flashed through her mind. It had been his family's mark, not hers. Nathaniel turned toward her, anguish tightening his jaw. It was arranged years ago without my consent. I broke the understanding long before you came to Ashbourne. Broke it? Eloise said. You merely delayed it. Do you think your mother would permit such defiance to stand? She has already written to London. By morning, the story of your midnight confession will be halfway to Mayfair. The storm roared outside, shaking the glass panes. Nathaniel's composure fractured. You would destroy an innocent woman's name for sport? Eloise's smile faded into something cold. Not for sport, for justice? You humiliated me before half the ton when you refused the engagement. Did you imagine there would be no consequence? Clara felt the room tilt, her breath unsteady. So, this, she said quietly, is what you came for. Eloise turned her gaze upon her, eyes glittering with satisfaction. I came, she said, to ensure that no one forgets their place. Something in Clara hardened then, the same quiet defiance that had once carried her through years of whispers. She stepped forward, her voice steady though her heart thundered. You mistake me, Lady Eloise. I know my place perfectly. It simply isn't beneath you. For the briefest moment, Eloise faltered. The rain softened to a patter as though the storm itself listened. Then, with a shake of her head, she smiled again, a predator's smile. How noble! But courage, Miss Whitmore, will not cleanse a scandal. By dawn, every servant in this house will speak your name. I will silence them, Nathaniel said sharply. You cannot, she replied. You may dismiss them. But rumor is quicker than dismissal. It will cling to her, follow her back to Somerset, to every drawing-room and parlor that hears her name. You will have ruined her, Nathaniel, just as you ruined me. His fists clenched. Then ruin me instead. I will not allow her to suffer for my weakness. Eloise's laughter was softer now, almost pitying. You already have. Clara felt the sting of those words more deeply than she wished. She looked at Nathaniel, saw the regret in his eyes, the helplessness that love, once again, could not mend. A sudden exhaustion came over her, as if all the years of restraint and endurance had led only to this. Another storm, another humiliation. I will leave at once, she said quietly. There is nothing more to be said. Nathaniel turned toward her, stricken. You cannot. To leave tonight will only make their gossip truth. Then let them have their truth, she said. I am tired of hiding from it. Eloise's expression shifted, triumph tempered by surprise. She had not expected Clara's composure, her refusal to crumble. A bold exit, she murmured. How poetic. Clara met her gaze steadily. And you, Lady Eloise, may find that triumph tastes hollow when it's built upon cruelty. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, as if in answer, thunder cracked above them, shaking the glass. The lamps flickered, throwing the room into shadow. When the light steadied again, Eloise had stepped back toward the door. You may wish, she said, to have your carriage ready by dawn. The Duke's mother will expect explanations neither of you can give. Her eyes lingered on Nathaniel. Good night, my lord. I hope you find your courage in the ruins you've made. She turned and left, her footsteps echoing down the corridor until the sound vanished into the storm. For a long while neither spoke. The orangery smelled of bruised leaves and damp earth, and the steady rhythm of rain filled the silence she had left behind. She will not stop, Clara said finally. No, Nathaniel replied, but neither will I. There is a tremor of something dangerous in his tone, resolve edged with despair. You must not confront her, Clara warned. Scandal thrives on resistance. To fight her is to feed her. He shook his head. To do nothing is to surrender you to her malice. Then surrender me, she said softly. Better that than see you destroy yourself again for my sake. He caught her arm, his voice breaking. You think this is pity? Clara, it is love, foolish, undeserved, but real. She looked at him, tears unshed but burning in her eyes. Love is not enough to withstand the world that made you ashamed of it. The words hung between them. Final as a closing door, she withdrew her arm, trembling, and moved toward the glass where rain shimmered like quicksilver. Outside, dawn was beginning to pale the horizon. The storm was passing, but the air still hummed with its charge. When morning comes, she said, I will be gone. Let them think what they wish. And if I follow, he asked. She turned slightly, her reflection faint in the glass. Then you will lose what remains of your name. He took a slow breath, his gaze fixed upon her as though committing her to memory. Names can be rebuilt, he said, but the thought of losing you. He stopped, voice breaking on the unspoken word. She faced him then, her composure faltering for the first time. Do not follow me, she whispered. Not unless you mean to cross that ballroom floor, once and for all. The clock in the distant hall struck 5, each chime resonant in the silence. Outside, the first carriage wheels stirred upon the wet gravel, and in that quiet hour between scandal and sunrise, Clara realized the world was already changing, and that the next choice, hers or his, would decide which of them survived it. The rain had begun again, soft but relentless, drumming against the carriage roof like a sorrowful heartbeat. Clara sat within, her gloved hands folded tightly in her lap, watching droplets race each other down the window pane. The wheels rolled through the slick streets, turning mud into mirrors that caught brief flashes of lantern light. Her breath fogged the glass, and in that dim reflection she saw the ghost of the girl who had first come to Ashbourne, hopeful, invisible, painfully naive. Now, even in her exile, she was no longer the same. She had not slept. Her trunk was hastily packed. The locket lay cold against her throat, a reminder of both mercy and mistake. The coachman had been instructed to drive through the night toward the station, where the morning train to Somerset would take her far from the reach of scandal. Yet each turn of the wheels felt slower, heavier, as if the road itself conspired to delay her departure. She told herself she would not look back. She had done all that dignity allowed. She had faced the storm, spoken her truth, and walked away before love could cost them both everything. But as the manor's silhouette faded behind a curtain of rain, something in her chest tore quietly, a soundless farewell. The carriage jolted, slowing. Clara leaned forward, alarmed. Why have we stopped? The driver's voice came muffled through the downpour. A rider in the road, Miss, won't let us pass. Her heart gave a violent start. Before she could speak, the door was wrenched open. Wind and rain rushed in, and there he stood, Nathaniel, drenched to the bone, breathless, eyes alight with something fierce and ungoverned. Clara, he said, voice ragged from a storm. She rose, half in shock. My lord, you cannot be here. If anyone sees— I no longer care who sees, he interrupted. I let propriety rule me once, and it cost me you. I will not make that mistake again. Rain streamed from his hair, his coat clinging to him like armor abandoned. He looked less a duke than a man stripped of title and reason. Get back inside, she urged. You'll be ruined. He laughed softly, a sound full of despair and wonder. I was ruined the moment you walked away. Her throat tightened. You mustn't say such things. I must. I have lived my life according to expectation, not desire. I have let others choose for me, speak for me, judge for me. No more. Nathaniel. Do not silence me, Clara. Not now. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. You think love cannot withstand the world's cruelty, but I have faced that cruelty without you, and it is unbearable. If I must lose my name to keep you, then let history call me what it will. The rain blurred him into something almost mythic, a figure carved from night and defiance. Clara's resolve began to fracture. You will regret this when the dawn comes, she whispered. Then let dawn condemn me. He extended his hand, trembling but certain. Stay, or if you cannot, then let me go with you. She stared at his hand, the gold of his family ring dulled by rain and shadow. You would abandon everything? I would abandon everything that is not you. Her heart twisted violently, torn between reason and longing. "If you come with me," she said, voice unsteady, "there is no return. You will not be forgiven." He smiled faintly. "Then let forgiveness be theirs to wrestle with. I have found my peace." Something inside her gave way then, not to foolishness, but to truth long buried beneath fear. "You are mad," she murmured. "Entirely," he said, and stepped into the carriage. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud. For a moment, the only sound was the rain upon the roof and their quick, uneven breathing. She looked at him, at the storm water on his lashes, the defiant tenderness in his gaze, and all the words she had practiced for goodbye dissolved. "You should have let me go," she whispered. "I did," he replied softly, "and it nearly killed me." She turned her face away, but he reached out, his gloved hand trembling as it found hers. The warmth of his touch cut through the chill, fragile but real. The carriage lurched forward. Outside, the world blurred into streaks of silver and shadow. For a long while, they said nothing. Then, very quietly, he spoke. "Do you remember the night I gave you the locket?" "Yes," she said, eyes glistening. "I thought it was a token of farewell. I realize now it was a promise." Her breath caught. And what promise was that? That no matter the distance, no matter the years, I would find you again. The wheels struck a rut. She stumbled, and he caught her, their foreheads nearly touching. The storm raged beyond the glass, but within the carriage, the world narrowed to the space between their breaths. For the first time, she did not retreat. "If we are discovered," she said, "they will say, 'I seduced you.'" "Then let them," he murmured. "They have said worse for less truth." A trembling laugh escaped her, a sound half disbelief, half surrender. "You are lost," she said. "Then I am happily so." Outside, the dawn broke at last, pale light diffusing through the rain, gilding the edges of his face, her hair. The moment suspended like a painting too vivid to be real. The carriage continued down the road, leaving Ashbourne behind, a house of mirrors and memories swallowed by mist. Inside, silence fell again, but it was no longer hollow. It was full of consequence, of love, of the future neither could yet name. Clara turned toward him at last. "Where will we go?" He smiled, his voice steady now. "Where the world forgets us, and we remember only each other." And as the carriage vanished into the rain, the world did not end in scandal, nor begin in forgiveness, but in the quiet defiance of two hearts choosing ruin and calling it freedom.